Follow at DryerBuzz on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook.
You are definitely a spiritually filled, thinking woman, and that is what we've been lacking in our community.
Go now to DryerBuzz.com and follow at DryerBuzz on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. It's all about the buzz.
It's a new dawn, it's a new day, it's a new life. The incomparable Nina Simone. Welcome to this special edition of Closer Look. I'm Rose Scott. If you don't know the name Tarana Burke, you're about to learn.
Tarana Burke, founder of Me Too is a movement that was founded in 2006 to support survivors of sexual violence, particularly Black and brown girls who were running domestic homes since then to include supporting home people, women, and survivors, as well as helping people to understand what community.
And of course, the Me Too movement of late began as allegations of sexual misconduct began to swirl regarding movie mogul Harvey Weinstein. Well, since this movement has become the rallying and even empowering call to action, it's been encouraging anyone who's experienced any type of harassment, sexual misconduct, or abuse to come forward. Today on Closer Look, we're going to dissect and examine what the Me Too and Time's Up movements are all about, and maybe what they're not. The format may be a little different than what you're used to because we're just going to talk. We have two roundtable discussions today. Joining me for the first discussion, the Honorable Justice Leah Ward Sears, former Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Georgia. She was the first African-American female Chief Justice in the U.S. Also from Atlanta's WNBA team, the Atlanta Dream, Team President Teresa Winslow. They're going to have a good year. Also, a regular contributor to Closer Look, Gigi Pedraza, Executive Director of the Latino Community Fund. Another regular contributor, social media and social justice commentator, Yolanda Lattimore from DryerBuzz.com. Thank you all for coming in.
Thank you.
I do want to begin with this because a couple of weeks ago I asked Patrice Kahn Cullors, who's co-founder of the Black Lives Matter movement, I said, how do you gauge the success of a movement? How do you gauge this? So Justice Sears, I'll start with you. Can we or should we already claim that the Me Too movement is a success because it's empowering women? And we're going to focus on women for this conversation. To come forward. Is that already a success?
Yeah, I think it's too early to tell. I'm 62 years old. I've seen these things begin and then dry up and then go back. And I think it takes years to see if something really takes hold and something really moves forward. I think we're in a retreat from the gains of the civil rights movement as a black woman. Mm-hmm. It seems that we've retreated somewhat. But I have seen in my lifetime gains made by women, definitely than when I was born in 55, but I think it'll take some time to be sure that it takes.
Gigi, what about you?
I agree, and I also think we are in the process of seeing how we move from a social movement, right, from a hashtag and from awareness that this actually exists, because Ms. Burke started 10 years ago, right? So it has already taken 10 years for this to be sort of mainstream. So now we're going from social to movement to impact, and, from Me Too to We Too. And so what do we as a society, men and women, do, right?
Teresa?
I think it definitely has made an impact. And I look at the sports world and I look at the business world, and not only do you have a conversation, but you have people now being held accountable for what's going on. And I think that's something that you're going to see more of that coming out, because women now feel like they have a voice and that they're not alone.
Yolanda?
Well, I think first and foremost, we say it takes about 10 years to become an overnight success. Mm-hmm. So now that we're talking about the Me Too, it took 10 years for that. But to see the actual results, we need to wait about 2 years until we have some data. Until we have some real data, we won't know what the impact has been.
And I want to make sure that we also include listeners in the community. And this is from Twitter. It's from Teresa Dahlman, who says, the framework for real change is in the law. Justice Sears, I'll start with you on that.
No, I agree with that. We are also, this is still a social movement where the pendulum has swung maybe past the law, because there are pretty obvious due process problems here. I mean, we're actually trying some people on television and in social media. That's not to say that this is not a legitimate and very important movement, but it's like any other movement. The pendulum swings. It's way on the other side, gone past where the law is, due process, innocent before guilty and all that. And it's going to have to stabilize to become something that people can really trust.
But Teresa, it is empowering women to go through the courts. You have a player on the Atlanta Dream team, correct? Or within the WNBA who is going through this.
Yes, and so Leisha Clarendon, who went to school at Cal Berkeley, recently filed suit against the school because she was sexually assaulted when she was in school. And so it's been an interesting, I think, experience for her because she really has gone through an evolution of, feeling what she's felt, and now feeling like she has a voice and that she has a platform that she needs to make a difference. And so we want to encourage her through that and support her in any way we can.
I want to stay with you for a moment because you're the president of the WNBA team here in Atlanta. Obviously, the WNBA is a part of the Women's Sports League. What has this movement, has it galvanized anything within the league?
The W has an incredible platform that I think has been underutilized, and I'm hopeful that we see that grow tremendously. Leisha's not the only player that's come forward. You also have Brianna Stewart, who played at UConn, and so what you see from the WNBA players is that they're very thoughtful, they want to be impactful with social action, and they want to use their platform in a very positive way. And I think you see that materializing now because they all feel like they do have a voice, and they feel like they're mentors because they are to young girls. And they want to use that in a very positive way to impact and make it better for everybody that's involved.
I want to throw this question out there because I have read, and we sort of talked about this before we came on air, I have read a lot of articles and a lot of comments that within this Me Too movement, it's just a small percentage of women of color who are coming forward and talking about their experiences. Gigi, what do you make of that?
I think it's important to understand that these conversations, saying Me Too publicly are extremely difficult. The stories that we have heard are stories from women that, have felt enough to be able to articulate those in public. And there are millions of women. In fact, I do not know a single woman of color that has not been harassed or assaulted. I have not. And so for people that have come out, there is privilege in that. There is people that feel that they can do it, that they have the access, they have the platform, like all of us are here, right? When you think about women of color also being more likely to be in low-wage occupations, right? The risk of those women to come out, physically, emotionally, economically, it's huge. Let's remember that 3/4 of all accusations of harassment include retaliation. Mm-hmm. So, I completely agree with that.
Yolanda, let's go beyond Hollywood and the celebrities and some of the names that we hear. But Gigi brings up a point in terms of women of marginalized communities, women who fear because they may be the financial winner in the household. As a woman of color, have you had these conversations with other women of color who won't come forward?
Think about it. I mean, the hashtag was originated by a black female. So that conversation happened 10 years ago, and it's been suppressed all of this time. It's been pushed into, in the social realm, safe spaces. The conversation has only been taking place in safe spaces because we've been to the mountaintop, we've seen the promised land, and it's not pretty. It's not pretty. People are at risk. But when the judge said the pendulum went past the law, when it went to social media, that's when it went past the law. Because a lot of times when we see something in traditional media, that's when lawmakers can then go under the gold dome with that. And they have not figured out how to advocate for those when these stories are in social media. When we can get the lawmakers to take all of this great data, these hashtags, the tweets, and the people behind the tweets, and take them with the same passion under the gold dome and get the laws, then that's when I think we're going to start to see the results. I
think that's right. I think there is some fear, I know because I talk to judges and lawmakers that once it got bled into social media and CNN and all this, that that there was a lack of trust. I've talked to many women who feel like, God, this is maybe not. This has gone too far. It's me too, me, everybody, me, everywhere, everything. And so there is out there. And I don't think these people necessarily, the folks who feel like this isn't a legitimate concern, but just this cannot become a witch hunt. And so it cannot be, it's not going to be, change is not going to happen if this becomes the Salem witch hunt. It has to be done properly.
Are you saying we need to find the right face? I think that's what we're talking about.
The right face, and we have to make sure that processes are in place. And they can't just be somebody making an accusation. This country is at least used to be a democracy about process and not about tweets and whatever somebody just has to say. It's always been about process.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because can I just add to the witch hunt? Because in the witch hunt part of that, let's not forget that the hunter is still out there.
There's no question about that.
But when the Aziz Ansari story came, it's almost like the guys were like, we got one, this one is not going to be legitimate. And if we make this case illegitimate, then that's going to legitimize all the rest of them, and we're going to be okay. Because they know if they find one that's a little bit suspect, it's going to discount all the other women. And what we have not done in the movement is find the right one.
I agree with you, Yolanda, and I also think that, those are distractions, right? We get distracted so easily. We cannot forget that we are talking about power, an imbalance of power, and violence, because this is violence against women predominantly.
Teresa?
Yeah, it's interesting because I've operated my whole career in the sports space, right? And so the amount of excuses that have taken place because people are great athletes or they're in positions of power, and a lot of adults have looked the other way. And I think that as individuals, we all have responsibilities, and I've watched it across the country. And it's time for adults to step up and do the right things to protect the kids and to protect everybody that's in process.
There was a lot of conversation about the role of women who might have been in leadership roles or powerful women, so to speak. I'm going to stick with Hollywood for a moment. Women who might have known or should have known or who knew and didn't say anything for these years. When we talk about accountability, should they come out and hold other women accountable?
Of course they should.
Right.
Yes.
But, they're part victims too. And, I know a lot of women who just think, mostly older women, who believe this is just how the way the world works, which is crazy because, but Rose, not everybody breaks everything down, right? This is just this is the way the world works. I was told that 1,000 times growing up with respect to the race thing. This is just how the world works, and if you want to make it, you have to play this kind of game.
But you made it. You were the first African American state chief justice.
Right,
in the country.
but you want to see the bruises on my. I mean, it wasn't easy, and I went through hell a lot of times. So, and not everybody's willing to do that, or willing to make the sacrifice. And I did have. I grew up in a middle class family. I wasn't on high, but I did have the support of my family and all of that.
Were there instances, Justice Sears, where you felt like a woman, whether it's a woman of color or whatever, should have had more support for you and didn't?
Absolutely. It wasn't about sexual assault, but it's, boiled down to sort of the queen bee, or women always competing against each other. Women there can only be like one woman on top. And the other woman will like snub you out to make sure she's the one woman.
Right.
But I actually disagree with that because I think, men do the same thing.
Do
Men
they?
just don't talk about it.
Okay.
I completely think so. And so I think, yes, the law is part of, it's a significant portion of accountability. But I think also education, right? What is okay? What is right? I mean, I have my 11-year-old daughter that has already received comments that are inappropriate, right? On the bus.
Right.
And she was like, is this okay? Like, is this part of being a teenager? No, this is not right.
So what'd you tell her? What did you tell her?
She needs to speak up. She needs to say this is not right, and she needs to go talk to the counselor about it, or I will go talk to the counselor. She can either do it or I can do it. So and so to me, right, women in leadership positions have a responsibility, and so we need to have representation. But I think there's a strength in numbers, because when we have numbers at those leadership roles, then we have the possibility to change culture.
Teresa, you've been in leadership roles all your career mostly.
Yeah, and I would say this, leadership can be lonely, right? And so if we are waiting for numbers, we're going to be waiting a long time. And I was a Title IX coordinator at Georgia Tech for the years that I was there, and it was really interesting because I dealt with sexual assault and I dealt with inequities with Title IX. We had a student athlete that was sexually abused by a travel ball coach from the age of 15 to 17. And when you look at process and you look at what happened, and she is in a great space right now. Ultimately, she worked to help him get arrested, and he's been put in jail. And she's in a much better place. But had we not facilitated that appropriately, none of that would have happened. But as a person, and I don't have children, but I have nieces, and so I really had to step back and say, if this had happened where I grew up in Buffalo, how would I feel if an administrator turned their head and didn't follow through all the process to try and get that person convicted? And so I'm very proud of that student athlete for doing everything she did, because it wasn't easy.
I think the one thing that I'm hearing that we need to understand is, one, it's part of the talk that we get as women when we want to be ambitious. Two, there's another woman in the room when it happens. There's another woman it happened to before you. But yet, everybody is like shocked. It's 1 in 3. They're 5, 6, 7. It's all women in here right now. But yet we've got a climate out there where women can't become empathetic fast enough to let this conversation go. I was in a reading one time and I said, well, where's the emphatic? It was 13 stories where something had happened to all the women. And I said, well, where's the one emphatically happy woman? And the hush that went over the room and the eyes that peered at me and said, well, if we tell her story, and it's going to discount everybody else's story. And it's like, but that's the one. We need to know who excels to great heights and don't end up with the war wounds. How do you excel? How do you go into these industries and feel safe? We've got to get to that point.
But is there such a woman?
There is.
Real happy that never has any.
Right.
Can you do that? Okay.
But she's quieted. Because, I was in a theater full of women. And even a pastor stood up and said, well, these stories need to be told because my church is filled with this. But I'm like, but you've been a pastor for 50 years. Where is your emphatically happy women? Yeah.
So
we can't continue to do this. We've got to break this cycle.
And I don't think it's just about being happy, right? And to your point is
right.
that I think
it's
anybody that elevates is always going to have some wounds, right?
Right.
You don't have success
right.
without failure. You don't have success without challenge. That doesn't mean that you can't be happy. It's not one or the other. You get both.
So do we want to use the word safe?
Well,
what's the word? What is the word?
Content.
Peaceful.
Okay. Your life is fun. And that's not just for women.
Right.
I think, like you were saying, everybody who has to climb that tall mountain slips and falls and scrapes and all that kind of thing. Women more so.
Yeah.
And, minorities, it's tough.
And
if you're just, I'm going to let you speak in just, this is your space, but I got to get this out. If you're just joining us, I'm joined by the Honorable Justice Leah Ward Sears from the Atlanta WNBA team, Teresa Winslow, who's the president, Gigi Pedraza, and Yolanda Lattimore. And it's the first discussion on today's program regarding the Me Too and Time's Up movement. We're going to have a conversation with the fellas. They're all here in the next roundtable. Let's talk about the fellas. Let's talk about allies in all of this. Because most of this conversation began with allegations of sexual misconduct with one notable guy. Then you heard
Which guy?
Harvey. And then all these other, Matt Lahr, Charlie Rose, even here with our NPR environment up in Washington. So men can be allies, yes, but what role should they play as in being allies?
Yeah, so last year we started a Man Up campaign. And so the idea being is that there are so many fathers that I talk to that want to be able to help their daughters with confidence, with self-esteem, and don't understand it. And I'm like, you have to hold yourself to the same level you want everybody else held to, and understand what you do to each female is going to be done to your daughter. And so for you to be able to step up and support that and support her level of confidence and help her, I think is extremely important.
Gigi, you have daughters.
I do. And interesting thing, when I saw the hashtag started developing, I didn't see any, yes I did, or anything like that. No acknowledgement. It wasn't ever me, right? So I think number one, don't harass anybody. Don't abuse anybody. Don't use their power. 2, don't be a bystander.
Right.
3, what is that you can do in your environment, wherever you work, to make sure there is a balance of power, of influence, and there is education, there is accountability.
I think one of the most important things is I don't think men, and please forgive me, male listeners, but most of them really don't get it. And even the allies don't get it. It's like,
Matt Damon.
No, you just really don't understand. No, I'm talking about your husband, or just you can hear it in their voice. They don't really understand. And I think if we could get them to really understand what harassment, what it does to you, the little quips and all the little sexual innuendo, then I think we would. But that's going to be a hard thing to do, to get guys to really get.
I'll tell you what was eye-opening for me in the Trump Billy Bush bus is the bus was full of men, and they were talking about somebody's wife. And Trump walked off the bus, Billy Bush walked off the bus, but the part that hurt me was the number of men that then came off that same bus behind them.
And those guys they're your husbands and the, your sons and all of that, and that's what Melania Trump called it, boy talk, as if that's how boys and men talk. Like that's what.
Like it's an excuse.
It's an excuse, or that's just what happens. And guess what? I do think that is what happens, and that's a problem. So.
As we move forward with the Me Too and the Time's Up movement, what are you hoping does come out of this?
Well, one thing, like I said, that I intend to do is to really help them use the data that we have on social media. We've not been at a data time before that we can take this data, work with lawmakers, work with organizations to really put a face on this so that we don't just say 1 in 3. That friends of ours on our Facebook timeline could look down our timeline and go 1 in 3 and really understand that this is real and it's happening and that we can be empowered to stop it.
And I'd like to see the culture change, and I know that it takes a long time, but I would like to see the culture change so that men and women, because I think women have a hard time with this too, can actually see women for the whole human beings that they are, not half human beings or human beings that are subject, like African Americans are for so many people. Okay, but kind of not. I'd like to.
Yeah, I would also like to, see the conversation focus on people that are usually not represented, that don't have the opportunity to have their voices heard. For example, everybody talks about the Time's Up movement and the Hollywood, right, and everything, and the dresses. How many people know that the National Women Association of Farm Workers, that has over 700,000 women, mostly Latina, actually sent a letter and say, by the way, we also are preyed by men and by individuals, right, that affect us emotionally. That conversation, I don't see it happen.
Or domestics.
Domestics, health workers,
health
right?
workers.
Workers that work in, fast food, food and beverage industry. I mean, those are the opportunities, the stories that we need to hear, that we make sure people are accountable, and that it's not just about, a dress or a hashtag. This is actually helping the people that need it most.
Teresa Winslow, I'll give you the last word.
Yeah, I think the conversation and to have the right people and everybody in the room, and we talked about boys talk, but how many times do we say, well, that's just a boy, when they're doing something at a young age? And so I think it really starts at a very young age of what do we accept, because what you accept is what you get, and we have to start setting higher standards and holding more accountability, but we have to teach the kids what's right and what's wrong. And as adults, if we're accepting it when we're at work and going home and acting differently, then we all need to take a look in the mirror.
Atlanta Dream Team President Teresa Winslow, the Honorable Justice Leah Ward Sears, Gigi Pedraza, Yolanda Lattimore, thank you so much for coming in and taking the time. I really appreciate it. We'll have the gentleman on next. You all are more than welcome to go next door to the studio and listen.
Thank you.
And maybe we'll bring you all back for a bigger discussion down the road. Thank you all for
Thank
contributing.
you. Thank you.
Thank you, Rose.
Good stuff.
Follow @DryerBuzz on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. It's all